I think I processed it in a very different way than people expected. There was never a moment. It's such a weird thing to explain. So first of all, I believe in, signs, and I believe that everything that's about to happen to you, there are breadcrumbs if you keep your eyes open. And I only learned that through my journey in life. Whether it's a relationship, some people call it red flags. I don't know that sensation, but I know the sensation of being aware. I try to, with my eyes wide open.
Tamron, you have said you knew you would be in journalism since you were so young, at such a young age. What would you tell the younger Tamron?
Oh, wow. You know what? I think I took a lot of her advice. That's why I'm here. I think that she knew probably way more than I know. The younger version of myself was pretty fearless. I ran with older kids, my older cousins, and never backed down. I was the negotiator. When they were in trouble with my grandfather, and we grew up in the South, and he was ready to go get the strap, they would send me in as the voice of reason to get them out of trouble. I was the one who was the first to climb under my grandfather. I had one of those little southern shacks, you might call them. It was a house on risers, and every summer, there was a dog or a cat that'd go under the house and have, puppies or kittens. And I was the first to crawl under the crawl space like the Goonies and go find the kitten. I was pretty fast. So I was jumping and running and grabbing the grasshoppers and beating the boys and all of that. So I think she knew a lot about being fearless and just running in the sun as it shines on you. And I think that's the best advice that I could give myself today. And I only received it from the kid that I was.
Where did that fearlessness come from?
Oh, I'm sure it's from my family. My grandfather was born in 1901. He could not read, but I make my living with words. And when you have what people perceive as the least, you find ways to have the most. And he was a very joyful man, a very proud man. I would watch him. He was a pit master for a living. Worked at a grocery store that had a barbecue pit in the back, and he was in the butcher department. But every Sunday he was out and driving to church, just immaculate and very proud. And I remember people always referring to him as Mr. Mitchell, even in this tiny segregated town. He was Mr. Mitchell, right? And I think that kind of point of pride and that hard scrap I got from him. And then my mother got it from her father. She was always very independent and very forward thinking, very unapologetic about wanting what she saw as a good life. So I think I got it from the roots of the tree.
It's funny. It's like, it sounds like too, they treated you a little bit more like a little boy than a little girl, which
I think
probably
they just
didn't hurt at some level, right? Crawling under.
Yeah, and I think it was less gender and more just that's what kids do. They let me be a kid. They let me,
Yeah, for sure.
I think about my son now, and oh my gosh, I had a conversation, and this is no diss to anybody who has a kid who does the little scooter with a helmet. But before I had my son, I live in New York, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to let him wear I mean, it's a scooter. How fast is he going? I'll give you a
Sure.
break. Sure
Yeah.
enough, I get him. I'm like, helmet. My first day he wore, it's like elbow pads. And then we
Yeah.
met another, I live in New York City, and we met another family from Texas. And we all sat around laughing about, swearing we wouldn't have these city kids that are all padded up and afraid to fall. And there we are with a kid padded up. And I just think about my childhood versus my son's, where oh my gosh, my parents were like, go outside and find something to do.
Sure.
Meanwhile, if every minute of my child's life isn't planned or occupied, I'm like, oh
Right.
boy. But it was less, like I said, gender,
Yeah,
more just
for
go
sure.
outside. I grew up in a go outside and find something to do culture.
Boy, Tamron, I can relate to you on that for sure. Same deal, right? And you'd get stung
Yeah.
by a bee, you'd walk in and they'd throw an ice cube at you and say, put this
Right.
on it and go play. Go climb the next tree,
I
which is great.
remember it is. I remember. Listen, we went to. My dad took us to Corpus Christi one year for a beach vacation. This is back when in Texas they had all these. Oh gosh, what are the jellyfish? They were everywhere, and people were like, "Just put some pee on it." I mean, I was like, "Wait a minute!" Like jellyfish stung you, can put some pee on it.
Oh my
You just
gosh.
kind of grew up
Yeah.
that way, and
Yeah.
I look at him now and I just can't help but to laugh at even myself because I grew up where you got to get in and it
Sure.
wasn't a harsh life. I
Yeah.
grew up very loved and
Mhm.
very included in the
Mhm.
conversation. They never
Mhm.
left me out. My parents and everyone, they included the children. And that
Mhm.
made for us to be very aware of how lucky
Mhm.
we were, how loved we were, and the challenges
Mhm.
of life.
Mhm. And probably builds confidence at some level, would you say?
Hmm. I think confidence and character.
Mhm.
You know, I think even when I look at my son now, I have a couple of cousins who are a little bit shyer. I was always very outgoing. I was always very talkative, as you can see,
Mhm.
hence the reason that I do what I do. But but I think it was a confidence of not of like bravado. It was more of I knew I could. I ran track my whole life. I knew I was
Yeah,
fast, and I knew,
sure.
when people would come over, my cousin was like, "Okay, go try to race her."
Yeah.
They championed the things that you did very well, so there wasn't a
Cool.
focus on the things you didn't do great.
Mm.
It was this is what you do, and
Mhm.
gosh, and there
Mhm.
was always this pride in
Mhm.
what you brought to the table, and I think that provides confidence, right? Because we're not all
Mhm.
great at everything. I'm still not great
Sure.
at math. When people give me change, I don't even look. I'm like, okay, because you probably robbed me, and I don't. If I counted, who knows? My son's great at
Right.
math.
Right.
I mean, he's like a whiz kid at it. But
Mhm.
I grew up where around family members, adults who, for whatever reason, recognize that it's important to build up what someone does really well.
That's
And for
cool.
me, I rode and I love talking. And so I remember going off to school and back then they would give you grade your behavior, right? So I went to a Catholic school and it was like every time I brought home my report card, it's like talks at inappropriate times, you know, disrupts other people.
Mhm.
And those tools, those things serve me well today.
Mhm. Mhm.
My mom said, behave yourself at school, but she never said, shut up, go be
Right.
quiet. You know what I mean? It's like
Sure.
there are
Sure.
rules, but you don't have to shut up, and no one can tell
Mhm.
you to shut up.
You talked about your son, who I know you had, later in your life.
Yeah.
How do you parent him in a way relative to lifting him up, focusing on his gifts, if you
Mm,
will, to the things
yeah.
that appear to be such a gift relative to the way you were raised?
It's a work in progress. I just signed up for parenting classes, to be honest with you, because I thought you read a book, you wing it. And
Sure.
my son happens to be a lot more shy than I
Mm.
was. And so it's a very different personality that I'm used to dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and even today, he's in pre-K and we're already, almost over with the school year. And normally on Fridays, I'm not here in the morning. And today I was here and his father was taking him to school and he
Mm-hmm.
was sobbing, Mom, I just want to stay and hang out with you.
Oh.
And I said, I know, but you've got to go to school. And I think it's because he is the only new child in his class and he just never really found he's very popular. They all love him, I guess, because his name is Moses and it's a simple name, but he hasn't found his sweet spot and he's only 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I started to read books on the praise method, because I said, oh gosh, wait a minute, if you praise too much, are they going to become a narcissist? Like, I don't want,
Right.
especially I'm like, I don't want a guy who needs to, I don't need to, when he's
Yeah.
27, his partner come back saying I literally have to praise this guy all day. So we're using praise, and that it's a more about positive reinforcement and
Mm-hmm.
being very specific about, rather than just saying you did a great job today,
Sure.
being very
Sure.
specific with, he today he was having a hard time putting his lunchbox into his backpack, and and to be fair to him, the backpack is too small, but I was just trying to get a smaller backpack,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a big one where he looked like it was swallowing him, so I was like, oh, let me get a cute one. And
Sure.
his lunch thing wasn't fitting in, and he was getting so frustrated, and he's like, Mom, I can't. And I said, well, first of all, let's take a deep breath. And yes, you
Mm-hmm.
can, and you can
Yeah.
do it. And and he was the joy in his eyes of accomplishment when he was able to get it navigated inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's hard living in the city. I mean, as I said, my parents would say to me, go get in the backyard. I can't tell my child, go run out on 6th Avenue and watch out,
Right. Yeah.
So there's not but I try not to, let him sense that. So when we walk down a
Mm-hmm.
city street, he can't be too far away, but I
Right.
don't hold his hand anymore. And I tell my husband, let his hand go. And so we
Yeah.
have a
Good for you.
rule. We're walking down the street, but we hold hands going across the street, because I wanted to build his
Mm-hmm.
confidence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Last summer, he wanted to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. I watch a lot of documentaries, and he's always kind of there. And we were watching the Brooklyn Bridge anniversary, Ken Burns, and he said, Mom, I want to walk across the bridge. I was like, okay, great. So we got up that morning and went to the bridge, and it's the funniest little scene, Molly. I have a video. He looks like John Travolta in the opening of Saturday Night Fever. He's got this short set on that looks very New
Oh.
York, and he's
Oh.
walking by himself across that bridge, and he's
Oh.
got this little pop 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 to his walk. And
Oh.
I like, wow, he felt good, like I'm
Yeah.
walking with the grown-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I try, as I said, he's great at math. He's a math whiz. He's also taught himself to read. I wish I could take credit for it. He's taught himself to read.
At 4?
He's able to read.
Wow.
A lot of it is sight words, so we're working on phonics. So
Wow.
he's memorized sight words, quite a few. In fact, I had a conference call with his teacher today, of all things, and she said, "Yeah, he's taught himself to read." And I thought it was just me, and I said, "I know." She's like, "He can read, but it's sight words." And so we're working on phonics and sounding out
Wow.
words in there. But
Wow.
I tell him, and he says, "Mommy, I want to read to you." I'm like, "Oh, great, come on!" Or I just try to boost him
Mm-hmm.
up
Lift
and
him
tell
up.
him, yeah. And I said this morning, I said, you're so brave, and he loves Paw Patrol. And I'm like, just like
Mm-hmm.
Marshall and Chase when they're
Uh-huh.
helping out, just that's what I do.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I think confidence with kids,
Yeah,
so powerful. So
yeah,
powerful. So,
yeah,
amen to that. I love it.
yeah.
I want to sort of pivot a little bit to your
Sure.
work on
Hmm.
TV. And in 2017 you were replaced on the Today Show, and I know you've
Hmm.
talked about this a little bit. But I'm curious in that moment
Yeah.
how you processed it.
Oh. Well, it's interesting, Molly. I think I processed it in a very different way than people expected. There was never a moment. It's such a weird thing to explain. So, first of all, I believe in, signs, and I believe that everything that's about to happen to you, there are breadcrumbs if you keep your eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
And I only learned that through my journey in life. Whether it's a relationship, some people call it red flags. I don't know that
Mm-hmm.
sensation, but I know the sensation of being aware. I try to, with my eyes wide open.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular day that I learned of the decision, it's so funny. I was leaving the Today Show, and so people didn't realize that last week that I was there, I hosted my hour on the Today Show. I did my hour on MSNBC, and Lester Holt was out, and I was filling in on nightly news
Mm-hmm.
the next day. Well, so let me take a step even further back. My dear friend Savannah Guthrie had gone on maternity leave, so I was filling in for Savannah, doing my hour, going to MSNBC, and then I was supposed to go home and do Lester's show. So it was this big, big week in my career,
Sure.
like imagine
Right.
truly the biggest week of the most tiresome, but
Yeah.
the biggest week. I'm on the main Today Show. I have my backup, and then MS, and then I get to fill in for the big gun of
Right.
Lester Holt. Never had
Right.
happened to me. So I am on a high. I'm like, woo, I'm
Yeah.
proving my value. They see who else is going to do this. The ratings
Yeah.
were great. Yes.
Yeah.
And that there was a Tuesday, and I was walking from the Today Show to my cubicle. I had an office of Today, cubicle on the other side. and I saw three decision makers leaving an office. It was just by chance. I saw it and I said, oh, it's going down. Because I'd heard rumblings that they were going to make this change and they denied it. A couple of people had said, no, 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 we don't know what we're going to do. And it was like a spirit just said, it's going down. I called my mother and I said, it's going down. And she said, you really think they're going to do it? I said, yep, it's going down. I walked to host my hour of MSNBC, went into the studio, and my then agent texted me and said, they've decided they're going to make a change. And I said to him in reply of his email, tell them I'll pass, because there was like wasn't a cut of a firing. It's what companies often do. They just start to shrink down your profile. And so the idea was, well, we'll shrink down her profile. She'll accept it because look, this is a great gig, and then she'll be happy. I said, tell them I'll pass. And I went home. I prayed and I said, I'm not going back. It's not what I can live with. I knew that I had a value. I didn't know what the value was. Now, let me be clear. Some people have said, oh gosh, that was such a courageous decision. And, and I wasn't angry. It was never anger. I never felt like pissed off or how dare you, because people have a right to choose who they want on their team, right? I think most of us could identify with waiting to be picked. It's like you're playing dodgeball. You're like, is somebody gonna pick me? So we know, or even in a relationship, few of us are the first love of the person we're with.
Right.
I'm not saying, we're the
My husband
rebound.
never kissed anybody before me. Never was with
not
anybody.
even. He never had a third grade crush. Never. He always had a little cameo with your face on it. He knew the invisible
Same
screen.
with yours. I mean, we both had this journey. It's amazing.
Yeah, who knew, right? And so for me, it's like, they get to pick who they want on their team. So I was very calm in that spirit. But I'll tell you, I was also not a mom, so I didn't have that responsibility. I was not married. So it was kind of a decision for me. And if I had the responsibility of a child, I can't say it would have played out that way, right? I can't tell you that I would have said, I'm good, because every day we make decisions based on our loved ones. So I didn't have that pressure of, wow, will my kid be able to have a meal? How many people right now are going into an office where they're being, degraded or devalued or whatever those things are, but they can't cut the cord because they have a responsibility. I didn't have that specific responsibility, and it allowed for a big decision, but I was very at peace with it. I was prepared to prove them wrong. I didn't know how, but more even than that, Molly, I wanted to prove myself right. Right? You say to yourself, I'm worthy, I have value. All of those words of affirmation you say, hopefully to yourself. Now, how do you prove to yourself that you can live up to that?
What a gift that you weren't angry. What a wonderful gift that you weren't angry, it was an inside out, I'm better than this. I'm more valuable than this. Don't put me in
I
that
just thought
box.
it was a terrible decision. To be honest with you, I just thought, it's a really bad call. And that's the thing, the show was rating great and the chemistry. And so, and I wasn't ever upset about the other individuals, to be honest with you. I can't tell you I laughed, because there wasn't like those suckers. But there wasn't I just didn't feel it. It did not. And I would tell you the truth. It never. Now, listen, the next day when it was the most trending story and was I like, because people were fighting for you, and there's nothing better than having people fight for you. And that's really,
for sure,
that inspired the talk show. When I was pitching the talk show, I kept saying to different station groups, I know that beautiful feeling of people who don't know you rooting for you. And I knew people liked me on air. They enjoyed my work. And, I loved you on this. But there was a whole different feeling, Molly, of like, wow, strangers can root for you. They can. I mean, I never had that. I
Yeah,
was like, I'm
that's
sure Michael Jordan knows that feeling, and some,
right,
maybe
right.
Kelsey and
Tiger and
these
yeah.
Tiger, but I did not know that. I knew people appreciated the work that I did,
Right.
because people will come up and say, that was a great report, or wow,
Mm-hmm.
I saw you doing. But that sensation of rooting was always front of mind. And when I created the show, I said I wanted an environment where people, a lot of our guests would feel that people are rooting for you, because I
Mm-hmm.
think most of us want the best for other people, but we also
Mm-hmm.
want it for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing in this world, that we can easily believe that most people are negative. Most people, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you go on social
Mm-hmm.
media, but I don't think that. I think most
Yeah.
people are positive and they want to be rooted for. And I felt
Mm-hmm.
it in a magnificent way. And that kept the anger, I think. People were angry enough for me. I didn't need to be angry.
Right.
I needed to get work done. And I said,
Right.
you can't,
Right.
your wings can't lift if you are allowing the
Sure.
mud to hold you down. And I didn't want that.
Mm-hmm. Oftentimes in life, when we walk in and through and come out the other side of challenges, it makes us better.
Yeah.
It helps us grow. We learn about ourselves. What you learn about yourself
Mm,
as you reflect back,
mm,
both on the way that you handled it,
yeah.
the emotions that came up.
I think, especially in my 20s and my 30s, I'm not a workaholic, but I am a driven person, right?
Mm-hmm.
I,
Sure.
I've said in the past, I didn't always stop to enjoy the gardens that I'd, grown, because I was looking at the next pasture. I'm like, I need to,
Mm-hmm.
what's next? What's next? So I'm in Bryan College Station as a reporter. I need to get to Dallas. And now I get to Dallas. I need to get to Chicago. Now I get to
Yeah.
Chicago. I need to go to,
Yeah.
and so much of my life was consumed by work, and I didn't think of it as my identity, because I've never been a fan of people who say, well, what do you do for a living? I
Yep.
like, tell me, I'd rather know where you're from, because I might judge
Sure.
you if you're not a
Sure.
Texan, whatever.
Sure.
But I think I learned that truly I love what I do, but I could find other ways to do it. Like, I love being a reporter,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I love my job, but I don't have to be on a network TV show. But
Right.
that's always what I thought, right? For this job to be validating, for me to feel like I had accomplished it, I need
Mm-hmm.
to be on a network show,
Right.
and I don't need that.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
need that. I don't need it. And that's why it was so important for me to find other ways to express myself as a writer, as a journalist. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was able to walk away. And that's why I said, let me figure out other things to
Sure.
story tell. That's because, going back to your question about my childhood, that was the big thing. I was interviewing people and didn't know it, right? I preferred the company of older people, and I would
Mm.
sit on the stoop and talk and ask questions. My nickname was not necessarily, so I was always very contrary. What's going on? I was always a little
Curious.
precocious and curious,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't have to be expressed in a network TV show. I could
Mm-hmm.
express and show that curiosity of people in many ways. And I mean, when I left that last show, podcasts weren't even, nobody even knew what a podcast
Right.
was. You know
Right.
what I mean? And so
Sure.
we learned that there are so many other ways to storytell, and
Mm-hmm.
so many other ways to express yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
in that moment, I think that was the big thing, that type of job was not going to define me.
And at what point did you say, I'm a brand?
Oh,
Tamron, I am a brand. I have platforms that I
mhm,
own at some level with
mhm.
my name on them. Not own, but
Yeah, I know what you
um,
mean. Well, some of them
and
I do.
yeah, right, exactly. When did that
Mm,
click and you say, wait a minute, I don't need another network. I don't need the big boys. I got
mm.
this.
Well, so when I left the show, I a great part of what I did was speaking engagements.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I traveled the country. Um, People wanted me to come to their
Sure.
conferences and their meetings or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
they weren't asking me about other people on the Today Show or what happened. they were asking me about me and found inspiration in me. And I didn't know that was quote unquote a brand per se, but I knew it was a connection, right? Because ultimately the brand is a connection, right?
Sure,
Because people
sure.
connect to the brand and
Yep,
you are the brand. So
totally.
I recognized there was a connection. I also, Molly, and I didn't realize this until, now I'm in, and I'll be very honest, I'm very comfortable now expressing myself about my accomplishments. But there was a time I'd go into meetings and I felt the same sensation. I got to shrink myself down. And it wasn't like I'm walking in this meeting to shrink
Mm-hmm.
myself down,
Mm-hmm.
but I would walk in thinking, well, I don't want them to think that I'm a know-it-all. I don't want them to think that I think I'm,
Mm.
the kids say all that,
Right.
or I don't
Yeah.
want to be obnoxious. But I'd go into meetings and there would be people like, I did this, I did that. Da, 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 da. And so in selling this show to skeptics, right? Because
Yeah.
nobody's thinking the D list on the Today Show is about to be the national, talk show host, right? Let's be honest. And so the one who got fired is not that's not how that story. And then I'd go into meetings where people would tell me the last 100 talk shows that didn't work with far bigger names, and those
Mm-hmm.
shows didn't work for various reasons. It could be timing, it could have been anything, but they're going to
Mm-hmm.
tell you everyone who was more famous than you who did not
Right.
even get 2 months out the door.
Right. Right.
And so I had to learn to define myself. And so one day I realized that at one point I was on 6 different shows on 4 networks at the same time. Watch this. Today's show is taped live in New York, but it runs throughout the country, staggered.
Mm-hmm.
So when I left the Today Show, so my show was on at 9 o'clock in New York. It was over by 10 o'clock Eastern time in New York. I'd run over to MSNBC to be live at 11. Well, the Today Show was just airing in Texas. So now I'm live on MSNBC and
Wow.
taped on in Texas. Now I have Deadline Crime with Tamron Hall, which they love a good Deadline Crime marathon. So Deadline Crime is on. And so now you're up to 3. Then
Wow.
I had Sister Wives on TLC reunion. They're airing that. So now I'm on 4, all in on one day. And then the last week I was on Dr. Oz as a guest. So I'm on 5 shows. So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And all very different shows. So that's when I
Sure.
started to think of myself as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a weird thing to say about
Mm-hmm.
oneself,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also a mature thing to say in what we do. We
Sure.
are commerce. This is
Mm-hmm.
a business.
Yeah.
And I think a mature way to think about it is not to say, oh, shucks, I can't believe I'm a brand,
Mm-hmm.
versus leaning into, I have
Mm-hmm.
the honor and privilege of people enjoying what I do on multiple levels, down to wanting to buy the earrings that I
Right.
wear.
Yeah.
That's a great relationship with the viewer. And so I
Mm-hmm.
decided I wasn't going to all shuck myself through that and diminish that. I'm a brand because people have said, I bet on her. She's got credibility.
Mm-hmm.
I like what she says. I like how she handles herself. I like how she treats people. I like the way she dresses. I like that she had a baby at 100 years old, and all
Sure.
of that. And so I receive that because that's a
Yeah.
gift that people think enough of me to
Mm-hmm.
build up a brand. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't create it. It
Sure.
had to be consumed. And I'm
Right.
blessed that folks consumed it and consume it.
Right. And so you learned, it sounds like you learned a lot about yourself sort of in between that time of stepping away, turning down NBC, and then stepping into your own show where, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you're essentially a player coach on your show. That is hard to do. And now you're leading an enormous team and you've sustained this level of success, as you just alluded to, where so many people haven't made it work and you have. What makes you different?
It's actually what makes me like everyone else, to be quite honest with you, in that I think that people relate to the hard work. They know it's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we admire in anyone. And we want to see ourselves in that. I don't think I'm different. I think I have a unique journey. We all have a unique journey. And again, this is not me like, oh, shucks, darn, Molly, I'm going to
Right.
diminish myself. No,
Right.
I think that
Right.
people see the scrappiness and they wish they want to either be that or see that in themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
see like she's working hard, like
Right.
and that she's present. And I don't think those are unique to me. I think it's timing. Life is about timing. I
Mm-hmm.
might have launched this show. Trust me, if somebody had come to me in my 30s and said, you could do a talk show, I'd be like, I know I can. Point the camera.
Let's
But
go.
I couldn't. I wasn't ready then.
Yeah. Right.
I wasn't
Right.
ready then because to your point, I affectionately call myself a worker bee. I've worked for a
Yeah.
network. We had
Right.
producers, and now I have like 200 people, and I'm
Right.
executive producer, and I'm the creator of the show, and I'm pitching the show. There's a
Mm-hmm.
different level of responsibility that I was not ready for then. I
Mm-hmm.
needed to lose that gig to refocus, to prioritize how am I going to win this? How am I going to be good at this? How am I going to not put myself first, but put myself first, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so I think for me, it's just, oh gosh, I wish I could. I sometimes I watch Oprah's, or her thing. I'm like, I
Uh-huh.
wish I could have that masterclass esque, like, listen, children, here's how I did it. I'm kind of, I'm a really
Uh-huh.
goofy person. I come home and I cook, and I'm kind of a social loner, as my friends like to
Mm-hmm.
call me.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I'm stumbling through this life with a big smile, just like everybody else. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that can't be explained. I
Right.
can't say I'm different. You know how many kids I grew up with who probably would be better at this than me, but didn't get the alignment of the stars. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
meant. So I'm not sure why I'm here fully, but I'm not. I'm gonna ride it till the wheels fall off.
Well, I mean, what comes up for me a little bit is you have a tremendous amount of talent. Clearly, you've been insatiably curious your whole life, but you clearly have an enormous amount of drive. You've got a tremendous amount of
Yeah.
resiliency. You're intentional. You're disciplined. You have to be. What else is Tamron that has made her make it all
Hmm.
work inside
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
what some people might not have?
I am a strategic overthinker. I tell people often, I will map out a conversation ahead of the conversation that I'm anticipating. I sit
Mm-hmm.
there and I go, okay, I'm going to say this, and they're going to say this, and then I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
say this when they say this, and then when okay, I'm diligent about research. If I'm meeting
Mm-hmm.
with someone, because now it's the business, right? Because it's not just
Sure.
being on TV. I study how many kids you got, where you're
Mm-hmm.
from. I consume it.
Yeah.
My husband, he's a little different in his executive skill function, and he'll admit that. And he says, God, I don't know how you do it. But I plan out. To some people, Molly, it would be a strident life or like a not spontaneous life.
Mm-hmm.
But I plan things out down to the
Mm-hmm.
smallest detail. And I try to strategically approach everything. Case in point, my dad was in the military, and he said, you got to plan out your clothes for the whole week. That's one less thing you have to worry about.
Right.
So even with my show, we pick the wardrobe out a whole week in advance, from the Spanx to the earrings to
Mm-hmm.
everything. My son's school clothes on a Sunday night are way picked out, because you think about how many times there you are, and suddenly, oh gosh, is that shirt clean? Wait a minute,
Mm-hmm.
where's that
Right.
shoe? And now
Right.
you're late for this thing, and it's a
Sure.
trickle down. So
Mm-hmm.
I try to map out, dinners. I mean,
Yeah.
I plan everything out in advance, and I'm just, the things I can control,
Sure.
I control. And
Mm-hmm.
that allows for me to be able to not become so easily overwhelmed by the unknown variables that are creeping around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't make me a control freak. If
Mm-hmm.
it does, then it does. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
But I am very, very precise and very, um, I'm very strategic and precise about every minute that I can control.
Sure.
That I can control.
Well, I think high performers fundamentally structure their days differently than other people. I guess what I would be curious about, how do you, I mean, you're a wife and a mother, and you have cousins and family and friends, and life throws curveballs.
Oh, yes.
How do you navigate that inside of what is a very demanding and fairly, as you just shared,
Yeah.
tight schedule?
Yeah.
With intention.
I will be so real with you right now, Molly, because I have to be present. I am currently fighting back tears. Here's why. At 7 a.m., my mother called me. My 17-year-old niece is involved in a massive accident. She has a skull fracture. 3 minutes before we got on this call, I'm looking at her in a hospital bed. She had to be transferred from one hospital. It was a freak accident with her friends. They were horsing around and she was injured. My nieces and my nephews are my children before I had Moses. They've traveled everywhere with me, gone everywhere with me, done everything. I just got off the phone, last update before you and I started talking. I had to turn on the do not disturb. I said, guys, I have to do this interview with Molly. Text me, if there's a change. She's resting right now. She just got staples in the back of her head. Ran, slapped on some makeup, sat in this chair because you got to keep going. And the good thing is, before this meeting, guess what? I had the camera set up. I had the light set up. I had the mic set up. I had the earbud set up. And I showed up early. As you say, oh, wow, you're early. Now, if I needed to cancel, I knew you were going to understand. In fact, and this is how life is real time. This is my brother calling me right now because giving us an update. I'm sure everything's okay because we have a code for emergency. They're just probably telling me everything's okay. Oh, wow. But I planned it out. I knew we were going to have our call. I didn't wait to set up the camera. I didn't wait to make sure the level and I needed to go. Unbeknownst to me, that this morning I was going to wake up to this. I had our little thing all set up before we got on this call. And you have to control the things that you can and be prepared. And I didn't know that life was going to throw my family that curveball this morning. But here we are.
Tell me your niece's name.
Gianna.
Gianna, wow. Okay. We'll be praying for her.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I think it's important that I tighten this bad boy up and you get that phone off, do not disturb, and you can respond to some folks. Clearly you deal with detours and curveballs pretty darn good. You can clearly park things, lock in, be present, control what you can control, etc. You did it when you left NBC. You're doing it right in this moment. You've done it, I'm sure, a lot in your life. What has that taught you about you and your strength?
I think, like any of us, when we are in this situation of, he's like, what am I, you wonder, am I really that tough, right? Am I really that strong? What's my, he's like, stiffen your backbone. Can I, I've learned that I am as strong as the folks who raised me prepared me to be. They wanted me to understand that life clearly is a give and take. Life is going to test every aspect of who you think you are. But in those moments that you are able to sit with yourself and tell yourself, this is who I am. If you can do that as a person, as much as possible, when your moral compass is tested, you'll find your way back to you. When you lose a job, you'll find your way. It's like a magnet. And once you say, this is my magnet, this is what I am, you might feel a little shift here and there, but something will pull you back to who you are. I tell folks a lot, I try to write down just simple words like smile. It's hard not to smile when you write the word smile
Yeah,
down.
sure,
I
sure.
have a sign in my home. It's a neon sign. It's this art piece and it says smile. And when people come over, I tell them to stand in front of you. You don't smile, you might have to go. Because I'm like,
I
how do you
love it.
not
That's
smile when you know what I mean? And so
sure.
I think that's it. You know,
Yeah.
I love the curiosity that I love curious people. I love being
Mm-hmm.
a curious person. I'm curious to see how this journey goes. You know, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
late to the party mom and
Yeah.
all of those things that come with that. But as resilient as I am, and I hope that I appear for my son, I want him to know I was happy. You know, because
Mm-hmm.
in resilience and fighting back and having
Right.
courage, sometimes that carries a thread of earnest and
Mm-hmm.
serious. And I
Mm-hmm.
am as goofy as the next person.
Right.
I am as silly as the next person. And I want him to say, my mom was a tough cookie. But my God, we laughed. And this morning we were
Yes.
dancing to
Yes.
some little
Yes.
Gracie song. And
Yeah.
I don't want him just to know me as a tough, resilient. My mom,
Yeah.
ooh, you know, that time they let my
Yeah.
mom go. And yeah, I wanted to know me and Molly were laughing because
Right. Yeah.
sometimes stuff is so crazy you gotta laugh.
Yeah.
And I mean that. So when I walk out
Yeah.
on stage, when I'm doing whatever I'm doing, I am truly like
Mm-hmm.
I walk out sometimes the the doors of my talk show and I have the smile and I boop,
Oh,
and there it
cool.
is. It is. It just
Yeah.
feels good. It's good. So
Well, it's so cool. And it's what comes up for me is you have the ability to, as Nick Saban and lots of great football coaches, you are an athlete know, be where your feet are. I
yeah,
love that thinking, right? It's just
yeah,
be where your feet are, be present. And, I've heard you say that, right? That what you
yeah,
do at some level isn't about you. It's about
yeah,
the incredible people that you
yeah.
have the opportunity to have conversations with and share it with the world. But in these moments, you clearly have been able to really be where
Yeah.
your feet are, to lock in and be
Yeah,
present
it's
despite the
key.
various things that you have coming at you in life,
It is
personally or
so
professionally.
key. And you see the through line in sports and in life. If you can be where your feet are,
Mm-hmm.
you can pivot. I mean, I don't have a giant sized lineman coming at me and I gotta, you know, I
Yeah.
don't have to,
Right.
stop at a drop of a dime and do a pick and roll and try. I don't have to do that. But in life, to have those cat like reflexes that you
Mm-hmm.
need in
Mm-hmm.
sports and in
Yep.
anything, you got to be present. You
Totally.
can't react if you're
Yep.
not aware. And that's what I said earlier about I'm just aware. I walk with my eyes as big as they are, and these lashes are so long I'm talking to you. I am wide open
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you need to be present in that
Mm-hmm.
moment and
Mm-hmm.
be aware, like you said, grounded. I mean,
Yep.
even in yoga, grounding, you're got to be
Yep.
grounded,
Yep.
grounded.
Yep. Does that smile word help ground you? Is that your,
Yes.
people have different things that they lean into to lock in and be present. Is that yours at some level?
It is
Smile?
so mine. I'm
That's
telling
cool.
you, when you walk right in my home, it's right there. It's been in my home for
I
15
love it.
years. Um, even think of my dog. I feel like when she greets me, she's smiling.
Yeah.
I, I was doing a Peloton workout the other day. I'm like on my deathbed in this last thing. And the instructor said, smile. And I didn't make it the next 15, but I sure made another two. You know what I mean? It's like, because it's
Yeah.
like, that's what they did. They tell you, like, smile. I'm like,
Yeah.
my
You're like, girl,
legs
I
are
can't even
burning. I
breathe.
can smile, right? I can't breathe. But there's something just invigorating.
Sure.
It's like, whew. And I
Mm-hmm.
tell myself that even in those moments, just smile. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
grounding thing for me for sure.
I have this thing on my computer. I call it my smile file.
Oh,
And I drag and drop great notes, great emails, great nuggets. And then I have a physical one on my desk and I save notes from my parents and friends, whatever, and put into my little smile box and my smile file. Maybe you can steal that, girl.
I'm gonna steal that. I love
It's
it, but
so
it's true.
cool.
So
Because when you
it's a
have a
very simple.
tough moment, you peek at it and
Mhm.
it kind of gets you smiling
Changes
again.
everything. It's a therapy for sure.
Amen. So we got to talk about your new book real quick and
Oh
then we got
yes,
to
thank
hop.
you. Yeah, no, no, no.
So, I mean, on top of like, by the way, all of these unbelievable things, I mean, mystery series? Like what?
It's
Fiction
crazy.
author?
I,
Tell me. I
Oh
love
my
this.
gosh.
Watch Where They Hide, the new book.
Yeah. It's been a wild ride. I wrote my first in this it's Jordan Manning series. The
Right.
character is named after Michael Jordan and Peyton Manning because I fell asleep watching ESPN or something one night. And this she's a reporter who started out in forensic science and is being pulled into this world of journalism, but her grounding, her roots are far deeper in solving crime. And here
Hmm.
she is, inspired by my life as a reporter, but also now in this fiction world of thriller. And I created the first book in the pandemic. I'm 50 years old, where none of us knew what was going to happen the next
Right.
day. And it's like,
Right.
okay, I gotta do one more thing in this world. And I started to really write this character and the arc of the story. All of the stories are inspired by real cases that I covered as a reporter for 30 years, as a crime reporter for over 10 years. And there she was. And I said, I don't want it just a thriller, right? I want it to be juicy and all of that, but I want her to have
Hmm.
friends and a journey. And she's in
Hmm.
her 30s. And what happens when you work too hard and the guy in front of you is like, stop looking at your phone? Are you going to be present with me? Or, and you're struggling to balance
Hmm.
wanting love, but also wanting success and having friends that support you, which we all need. So while it is a thriller, it is one of those characters, like much like Sex in the City, where suddenly we're all in their business, right? You will
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
yourself all in Jordan's business and on her journey. But this latest case, Watch Where They Hide, it was inspired by two cases that I covered in like 2019, I guess, and right before my son was born.
Okay.
And two women had gone missing, and these cases just haunted my soul. And for
Hmm.
me, creating this book series has allowed me to give folks a glimpse into the life of a crime reporter, with
Hmm.
also bringing the thriller and kind of page turning atmosphere. But a lot of what you see in Jordan I experienced as a crime reporter, and things that people never expect,
Hmm.
right? Like
Hmm.
I said to
Sure.
someone, you're not supposed to be at a crime scene and then go home and forget that you were at a crime scene, right? It's
Right.
hard to
Right.
it's hard to
Right.
do
Talk
that.
about
And
departmentalizing. Yeah, it's
right,
tough.
exactly. And so you see the humanity in Jordan, you see why she's driven to solve these crimes, and you get a glimpse into the very unusual and very strange world of being a crime reporter. I'm so proud of this character, and my husband, when I wrote the last page, because it's got a hell of an ending, my husband said, "What's going on in your sick mind that you came up with this?"
That's got to
It's
unlock
incredible.
this creativity in you that is so fun to tap
Yeah,
into, I bet.
it
It's
is. You know
amazing.
what? It gives, as I said before, when I started out in this business, the success model was to end up on network TV, right?
Hmm.
And when I lost that position, it gave me a greater perspective on the many things that we all can do. You can love what you do, but
Hmm.
we all get a second chance. We get a third chance. We get a
Hmm.
fourth chance. This
Hmm.
life is not just one chapter. Going back
Right.
to Jordan Manning, it's many chapters. And
Hmm.
how exciting is it to see how it's going to play out? And I
Hmm.
love a lot of the ideas and the entrepreneurship that came out of that very complicated and difficult time for all of us in
Hmm.
2020, where we decided, I don't know, it might be my last day, so let me
Yeah.
let me marry this guy finally. Let me write this book. Let me go ahead and start that cookie company. Wait a minute, I've been wanting to do an ice cream company. I have a guy who he started doing barbecue in the back of his townhouse in Brooklyn, and now a couple of years later, he's got a line of that's 2 hours
Wow.
long. He
No
studied
way.
he started pit master on YouTube and had the cops being called on him in Brooklyn, and now he's got this hugely successful barbecue restaurant.
Wow.
And so these strange things were born in
Hmm.
that time of insecurity, and
Hmm.
mine happened to be, I want to write a novel. People said, "Oh, memoir and beauty book." I was like, "Listen, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, so I'm going to," and that's what I tell people. This book is, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of Jordan. I think if you read it, you're going to be blown away. Your
Oh,
heart's going to be pounding and all that. But the secondary level of it is that I was 50 years old and I tried something new.
yeah, so cool.
I was
Yep.
50 years old and I stepped out on faith and said,
Yeah.
this life is supposed to be a journey. It is not a one train stop. And when you get an opportunity, I don't care what it is, add a train car to this ride.
So cool, girl. That is
And that's
awesome.
what I did.
It's so cool. It's wherever books are sold.
Yes.
People need to scoop that up. So listen, we end with rapid fire. I'm going to hit you with a couple quick ones and let you go.
Okay.
If you could have any guest on the show, who would it be and why?
Oh, the guests. Oh, and I don't. Oh boy, that's a you got. There's not one. It's a feeling. I love people who come to play. So if you are coming to play, because I used to have a list, and then I interviewed somebody who's on that list. It was the worst interview ever. So now I'm like,
they were boring.
They didn't want to say anything. I was like, you can just pack up and go. Yeah. For me, it is a feeling. I love people who want to talk, who want to come to play. I don't care if you are famous. I don't care what it is. Come to play, and that's a good conversation.
I love it. What's one piece of advice that has stuck with you over the years, and who gave it to you?
Bet on yourself. Bet on yourself.
Did you come up with that? Did somebody tell you that?
No, it was something my family, that doesn't mean you don't need a team, right? You always need a team, but it goes back to that gut, right? How many times have you listened to someone else and it turned out as a disaster and you're like, if I'd only listened to myself,
exactly.
God dang it, I would have hit the lottery yesterday.
Going on.
Exactly. Yeah. So instead of saying, if I'd only listened to myself, I say, bet on yourself.
I love that. Girl, I'm stealing that. So the show's called Game Changers. So who or what is a game changer in your mind, in your head, in your heart that inspires you and why?
Oh, loss is a game changer because in loss you can win.
Love it. Thank you for that. Boy, I haven't gotten one of those like that. That was a mic dropper, girl. All right, listen, you go hop. I can't thank you enough. I will be praying.
Thank you, my dear.
I appreciate you showing up and taking